Right, hello everybody and welcome to this evening's webinar. A very warm welcome to you all. It's wonderful to have you here. So today is kind of a little bit of almost like an experiment. I decided to have a look at the major questions that are coming in from parents around education. I have not focused on any particular age group, although predominantly the little ones. But there were a lot of questions that came in. I put a question out there on my Facebook page saying, what do you want to know about? And that's really the questions that I'm going to be addressing tonight. So I really hope that I do answer your questions. I think that most of the questions you will have around choosing your babies and your child's education will be answered. And in the event that it isn't, please do feel free to pop it up in the chat or in the Q&A. I definitely will try and get to them if you're on the live audience tonight. And yeah, so without further ado, let's have a look at what's going on in terms of education and how do you make decisions for education. All right, so let's share our screen. There we go. All right, so I'm Meg Faure. For those of you who don't know, I am an occupational therapist, and prior to wearing my infant specialist hat, as the author of Baby Sense and Weaning Sense and the co-founder of Play Sense, I actually was an occupational therapist working in schools in Johannesburg. And so I got to know the education system really, really well. And then, of course, I had my own children and had to make education decisions along the way. My eldest is already at university, and I've got a high school daughter still. And so I really have been through what you've been through. I know your questions, I know your pains, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And right at the end, I'm going to get a little bit personal and just share with you really the three kind of what I think mistakes I made along the way. Hopefully you can learn from them. And three of the things that I think I did that I would redo again and again. So the problem with parenting is it's actually been said to carry a massive weight of responsibility. And I think that is what overwhelms us as new parents of little babies, is that every single decision feels like it's a decision that could affect our child's entire life. And so we carry this weight of responsibility. And of course, the flip side of that is that we knew exactly what to do until the day our baby was born, or at least until we fell pregnant. And so it's very easy from the outside to have opinions and to know exactly how you're going to chart your child's course. But of course, when you get to it, charting the path becomes something that's quite different, and there's a huge amount of anxiety. And some of the questions I talk through tonight will actually reflect the type of anxieties we have as parents. So just a little bit of background, this you all know, of course, is that there are two things that really contribute to who your baby is. The one is their genetic code, and there you can see the sperm fertilizing the ovum. And that genetic code comes from you and your partner, and it really kind of codes for what your child should be able to have the potential to do well. But it's what comes next that really makes a difference, and that's the nourishing and nurturing of your baby that really makes a difference, both in pregnancy and after they're born. So one of the things that we know about brain cells and about skill development is that they develop in the context of stimulation. So stimulation is very, very important. And early on, it's things like putting your baby on tummy time and letting them look at black and white mobiles and letting them crawl. Those sort of types of stimulation are very important. But as they get older, it moves into education. And so what happens is your child is exposed either to stimulation or to education. So their brain cells start to connect. You probably know this, that every single brain cell that we need for our entire life we're born with on the day we're born, but we don't have all the connections. And it's those connections that make sense of the world and that develop our skill set. So our brain cells start to connect and we start to develop brain circuits. And brain circuits are much like these well-traveled pathways through the forest that we can see here. And so the more a pathway is traveled on through the forest, the more well-worn it becomes. And the more well-worn it becomes, the faster we can run on it. And so the faster the information is conveyed from one brain cell to the next. So the more that you practice something, the better you become at it. And so that's really the way that brain development happens. So really, brain development does not happen because of your DNA. Your DNA is not your destiny. It's really what comes afterwards. And that's why our education decisions are things that we really do take very seriously as parents. All right, so one of the questions that is often asked of me, and we're going to touch on this today, so I just wanted to just give you a little bit of insight, is one of the questions that I'm often asked is, what is it that we really want to equip children with? And, you know, for many years, going back into the 1900s, even late 1900s and early noughties, the early 2000s, there was a big focus on skill acquisition. So children needed to be able to read early and write early, and we had these baby signing classes, and you could even teach your baby to read very early. And there was all this focus on like getting those skills bedded down. And then more recently, of course, we've woken up to the fact, and this is kind of in the last 5 years, that actually skill acquisition happens throughout our lifetime. You can learn, if you want to go and learn how to code or how to play the piano, you can put yourself on a course. We know how Udemy, as an example, or Kajabi, or any one of these skill courses can skill us up very, very quickly. So information is quickly accessed by the human brain, and we can learn from it from all the way through our lives. But there's some magical things that we actually can't learn all the way through our lives. And these are what we call the core capacities for engagement or for success. And these core capacities, or as in play sense, we call them soft skills. And we call them soft skills because they often are kind of disregarded and not placed. There's not enough importance placed on them. So, you know, if I said to you, do you want your child to have really good language skills, or do you want them to be able to read early, or do you want them to be able to self-regulate? You'd probably think about it twice and think, well, it's probably a trick question, so obviously self-regulate. But you'd probably think, okay, obviously I want them to have good, strong verbal skills. And the reality is actually that a lot of research that's been done over the past few years shows us that skill acquisition can be left for later, and that early on we need to make sure that the goal is actually these soft skills. And these are the 5 soft skills that research has shown us is very, very important for long-term success. And that is emotional connection and relatability, the ability to connect with another human being. It's the groundwork of being able to lead a team and just to be able to function in a team. And for any of us, regardless of what area you're in, you'll know that integrating in a team is very important. The second soft skill that's critically important is self-regulation, and potentially it's really the most important of all. That's self-regulation is the ability to control our behavior, to control our thoughts, to be able to pay attention, to be able to stay calm in the context of a frustration. And the ability to self-regulate as a little one has been shown long-term to be the highest predictor of long-term success. And that, if any of you are interested in that, go and have a look at the marshmallow test by Walter Mischel. And you'll find that actually what he found was that little ones who could self-regulate at 3 to 5 years old were more successful in every area of life. And that cohort of children that he tested in the 1960s and 70s is actually still being studied to this day. And they've been studied on every aspect of success, from marriage to career to academia to SAT scores, whatever it is, they have been measured. And so self-regulation, we know, is very, very important. The third buzzword that you'll hear all the time is executive function. It's otherwise known as the CEO of the brain, which is the ability to have a look at a problem, work out what resources you've got in your environment, human and natural, to be able to solve the problem, execute on the problem, and then change direction very quickly if the solution isn't going well. And that's why we call it the CEO of the brain, because it kind of really does the planning and the execution of the brain. And executive function is critically important long term. And then, of course, creativity. We know that almost everything, machines will be able to do almost everything in the future, especially with AI and the way in which machines are going to be able to learn from themselves, so machine learning. Machines are actually going to be able to do most of our menial jobs. The thing is that there has to be something that brings a human element that is completely unique, and that, we believe, is creativity. So the ability to think out the box, to think in a different direction, to not just base things on what you've learned before, but to really think about a solution that really hasn't been thought of before. And that element of creativity is critically important, and very important that we bed that down in our children. And then, of course, positivity and resilience is very, very important too. So those are what, in play sense, we call the super senses, sorry. And the super senses of things like being able to be positive, having a love for learning, being able to have volition, having resilience, being able to bounce if you fall. And so all of these things become critically important. And so when we're looking at education, right from the get-go, we want to make sure our children's education positions them for the future. And that means the education choices you make right now need to take these 5 things into consideration. All right, so what I've done is I've put a question out there on Facebook. Some of you may have seen it. Some of you may have asked some of the questions that are going to be presented tonight. And I said, ask me your education questions. And I kind of put them into buckets. And these are the 8 questions that I found that most parents were asking. And I'm going to position the question, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of the principle of why I'm saying what I'm saying, and then I'm going to give you the practicals of what you need to do. So the very first one came from parents of very young babies. What should I be doing with my little one to stimulate her brain and to teach her future skills. And I really loved the fact that the mum who asked this question put in the word future skills, because I've just spoken to that. I've just alluded to what future skills are, and they're not the things like learning Mandarin or being able to read at an early age. So the guiding principles for this should be, first of all, to prioritize the future player. Don't think about the short term. And I think it's very easy when we are stuck in the quagmire of parenting to focus on the short-term gains. And so an example of that would be whose baby walked first. Okay, so some of our babies walked at 9 months and others walked at 18 months. Walking has a very wide range of normal. And the mum and dad who had the 9-month-old walker might have, for a couple of days, thought, sure, you know, I've done something right. I've obviously given them the right amount of tummy time because they're fabulous. They can walk early. And the moms of the 18-month-old who's not walking yet is thinking, my gosh, is there something wrong with my child? Are they ever going to catch up because they're so delayed? Because 9 months, when you're only 18 months old, is half your life. So it feels like forever. And it's very easy to lose sight of the long-term picture. The long-term picture of the difference in gross motor skills between a 9-month-old and an 18-month-old in terms of when they walk is really zero. And in actual fact, I have a theory that our very early walkers are disadvantaged because they don't get enough reciprocal movement. And I happen to have one of those out of my 3, was a little one who crawled for a very short period and then got up walking at 9 months. And so you can see that while you're in the midst of it, it might feel like something that's very successful, but you're not prioritizing the future player. And so your education decisions need to take into account the future player. And this will start to bear itself out as we talk about making our education decisions. The second principle you need to know is that stimulation is the architect of the brain. And so an enriched and stimulating education environment is important. I am definitely not saying that it isn't. And you'll see, I think that it is critically important that your little ones are stimulated and are optimally stimulated. A third aspect of that, however, is that engagement is key. Engagement and actually being social with another human being is actually more important in some ways than just sensory stimulation or just mindless learning of letters, let's say, for instance. So engagement is very important. And a couple of the questions that came through, which I haven't popped up here, were at what age should my toddler start recognizing numbers and letters? And the reality is that that really isn't important in the toddler years. What is important in the toddler years is the ability to engage with another human being and to enjoy another person's company. So, and then the last thing I do want to say is that language is known as the ultimate tool of the mind. So if we have something that can unlock our minds, it has to be language, because we have to be able to talk in order to engage another human being. Now, that doesn't mean, again, that our little ones have to speak early. In fact, some of our little ones will only speak close, start really spelling out words closer to 2.5, and that's okay. But just the fact that our little ones do have language and have a stimulated environment for language is very important. All right, so those are principles. Think about the future player, which is our soft skills. Think about stimulation being important. Think about engagement being important, and think about language being important. So how do we do this? Well, one of the ways that we best do this is through imaginary play. And imaginary play, I'm sure many of you can remember back to the games that you played as a child. Think back now, what was your favorite game? So mine was that I was running a very busy hotel and I had to take all the bookings, and I was picking up the phone and putting in the bookings. And that imaginary play had next to me my sidekick, who was my sister. And so we had played this game together. Now, through that imaginary play, I was really, really honing those soft skills. I had high executive function, being able to plan which room those bookings would go into. I had to be able to collaborate and get my sister to join me on this path of playing the game I wanted to today, even though she wanted to play school again. And so imaginary play becomes very important. It's also, we know, the very best way to unlock the tool of the mind, which is language. Because if I've got a thought in my mind and I want you to play my game, I have to find the words to tell you. And so having your little one play imaginary play is very, very important. The second part of that phrase, play, is obviously critically important. We know that play is the secret to all of those: stimulation, engagement, and language. It's also very important that your little one is bored, because what boredom does is it gives rise to creativity. And creativity, as we know, is one of those soft skills that your little one is going to need to be a future player. And being bored is, what happens is when children are bored, they get up to mischief. So they find those boxes, they unpack that Tupperware cupboard, they make a mess with the dog's food and some water. And as they do that, they're experimenting and they're creating. And so being bored is very, very important. So I think while stimulation is important, boredom needs to be matched with it as well. So when you're starting to think about stimulating your baby, yes, stimulation is important, but period of boredom is also very important as well in terms of having a creative mind. often with our little ones, they don't know how to start a game off. So it's that kind of ideation. And so they're bored and they just get whiny. But it's giving them a little bit of a direction, like, what can we do with this box? Or what do you think we should do with the Tupperware cupboard? Or do you want to help mommy unpack the Tupperware cupboard? So give them a little bit of a strategy to get going with, and you'll find that they'll start to get creative. Another thing with developing the future player and stimulation is to try and use everyday objects. I'm a big fan of a big cardboard box. I think it's actually the best toy in the house. But even things like naked unpainted blocks are very, very good. So everyday objects really are the most fun though. Things like pots and pans and Tupperwares, those are fabulous for your little one. I don't know if you've seen that TikTok that went around with little ones who were offered a toy or an everyday object. And every single time they went for the everyday object. Try it with your little one. And then very importantly, they do need some social engagement. And so this means starting to connect with other little ones. And this should happen from about 18 months of age, whether it is a sibling or a cousin or the little one next door or a play date with somebody who was in your antenatal class. Social engagement at that age is important. They won't play together, but they'll have what is called parallel play, where they play alongside each other. And then the last tip I've got for early stimulation of minds is to read to your little one. Very important. It unlocks that tool of the mind. Right, so this is another very common question. In the context of the events of 2020, I have chosen to keep my child at home. She's 17 months old. Is she going to be socially disadvantaged when she starts school? And that was such a great question, and it came through a lot. So the guiding principles. Number one, the most important thing in terms of foundation is a loving foundation. So having a mother or a father or a caregiver, a nanny, a granny, who really focuses in on your child's emotions and meets their needs. Very, very important first step foundation. And if that's happening at home and they're not going off to school, that's absolutely perfect. The second thing that is needed is exposure to relationships. So like I said on the previous slide, when we talked about stimulation, there needs to be some sort of engagement with little ones of a similar age. And that's how they develop resilience, because one of the things that we know about little ones who stay at home with us on our own, particularly if we are a parent who's not working and we're able to structure our entire life around our child. In other words, they're a firstborn, we're not working, and everything moves around them. So I was one of those moms with my firstborn son. And what happens to them, what can happen to them is if there is no frustrations, in other words, there's no other toddler taking their toys away. And if everything always goes their own way, they don't develop resilience because they are not confronted with frustration. So you need to have some frustrations in order to start to develop resilience and coping and strategies for self-regulation. So if you're going to have your little one at home without having any little friends around and without having siblings at home, that's fine. But just make sure that you're not indulging them to the point that they're always getting their way, because otherwise you're prepping them for a situation that is not real in life. Because when they get into their play group, when they're 3 or 4 or 5 years old, they're then going to encounter challenges and frustrations, and they're going to come up with no strategies for how to cope with that. So little frustrations, little boundaries are very important if you're not going to expose your little one socially. But I would say, as much as possible, have exposure to relationships and do have those play opportunities. So how do we do this? It's things like play dates. Play dates are really, really powerful. And as I said, you can set it up with cousins, with friends. And then Zoom encounters. Prior to lockdown, I did not believe that little ones could really socialize through Zoom, but we had to do it. For many of you whose parents are in frail care or in care homes, your little one cannot get to see them. And so you see this engagement between grandparent and child, and there definitely is a social connection. So these incredible, very plastic and pliable brains that our babies have been able to adjust to screens and are actually able to engage socially. But that is what's very important about it, is that it's social engagement with another human being. It's not watching a screen like a Teletubbies or Peppa Pig show. It really has to have some social engagement. Make sure that there's some frustrations in your child's day, which we've spoken about. And then do look into play groups. I do think that, if you've chosen to have your child at home, that's fine, but maybe try and get them into some sort of little play activity. Like, for instance, maybe the library near you, I don't know if they've opened these up near you yet, but maybe they're having book reading once a week where a whole lot of little toddlers come and sit around in a circle, and then they start to learn to share a little bit. And so try and get your child to be able to be exposed to some social settings in play groups as well. All right. Okay. So if there is an option for my child to stay at home or to go to playgroup, which is preferred. So should we go for stay at home or should we go to playgroup? And at what age should they start playgroup or should they wait for preschool? So this is going to be a very personal decision for all of you. I'm going to give you a couple of principles for this. All right. So the first principle is, if you are being a reflective parent, in other words, you are reading your child's signals and you're helping them to start to self-regulate, you're doing a great job. And that's really the starting point. And if you do that all the way through and you decide not for your child to go to school, that's absolutely fine. But you do need to make sure that you're reading their signals, that you're helping them to self-regulate, because that's the type of thing that they would be introduced to when they went into a playgroup and they were confronted with a couple of little tricky situations. When we train our teachers, we teach them that they need to be co-players and co-regulators. And so co-regulator means that there's a teacher who can be really, really focused in on your little one. And this can really only happen in small groups. And so that's one of the reasons why in PlaySense we do believe in the small group scenario, because your child goes from a relationship of reflective parenting at home, and that can be from you or a caregiver or a nanny or granny, and they go into a social setting where they need to be co-regulated again. And the problem is that in very big groups, that's almost impossible for a teacher to do, because there are just too many moving parts, too many moving toddlers for her to really focus in on each child adequately individually. So the principle, if you are going to introduce your little one to a playgroup, is to keep those numbers really small. There's no chance that your child can be adequately seen and co-regulated for if they are not in a small group. So that's very important. So when you're choosing your childcare and the time at which they should start going, try and make sure it's a small group. And then obviously, I do believe in at-home education at this age. I think that our children have got a lifetime of being institutionalized and put into a school setting, being shown rules and having to fit in with norms that are for a large population. And I don't believe that this is the time for it. I believe that early childhood education should be at home. So what is the optimal in terms of age? Well, I do think that for the 0 to 2-year-old, being at home or in a daycare setting with a primary caregiver is the best you can do. So try and go for a smaller group as possible, or a nanny or a granny. Those type of things really, really do pay long-term dividends. Not putting your child into a group of kind of more than 4 children with a day mum would be a principle that I would be adhering to for the child under 2. And then from about 18 months old, children start to be ready to go into playgroups. And for every little one, it's different. Sometimes it's at 18 months and you just know they're ready. So my second child, very, very social. She was a social butterfly. She wanted to be able to get into a playgroup earlier on. My third child, not so much. And so you really must watch your little one's personality. And if your little one isn't ready, please don't push them in. Very importantly, I think probably one of the worst decisions I made, I'll talk about my bad decisions later, but was putting my little boy into a playgroup too little. And then from 2 to 4-year-old, I think that there's this kind of optimal range in which it's really, really good to introduce them to playgroups, because it gives them that little bit of frustration of having to adjust to a social setting. It teaches them about social skills. It allows them to be able to start to move towards having some boundaries, social boundaries and social norms. So I think that from 2 years old is the optimal time. But for some little ones, as I said, it's going to be closer to 3 or maybe even 4. But for some little ones, certainly by 2, they are more than ready. However, having said that, the optimal environment for a 2 to 4-year-old is in a home situation with a ratio of no more than 6 little ones to a teacher. And I don't mean a teacher who's teaching 12 and a classroom assistant who hovers around and does the nappy. I'm talking about somebody who is focused in emotionally with your child, a relationship of 1 to 6. And that's obviously where we do recommend PlaySense. All right, so here's a tricky one. And this is a very interesting debate. And I have actually, over the years that I have been a parent and an occupational therapist, I've watched the pendulum swing on this one. So this is the great December baby versus January baby school readiness debate. So the question came from the mom: should my December baby wait a year? Is being the youngest in the class a disadvantage? And I had an encounter with my second child where she was, and I know parents all say this, but she was quite advanced in her emotional regulation. Other two, not as much, but she was ready. She was school ready emotionally, but she was a November baby. And I can remember going to a private school in Cape Town, and they said to me categorically, their cutoff for that year was November, and she would fall into the following year. And on that basis, we chose a different school, and we did the right thing. but it is a very, very heated debate and one that you will be confronting. So let's have a look at the principles. So the first thing I want you to know are developmental principles, and that is that the range of normal is very, very wide in little children. And yet later on, they catch up dramatically. So please do not, you must understand that your December baby might look way younger than a baby who was born in January of that same year. In other words, they're almost a year apart. 11 months at that age looks vastly different. And we need to remember that. But what does happen is that the catch-up comes later on. So that's the first principle, and I'm going to take you into what I mean by it just now. The second principle that you might have heard of when you talk about this is the outliers principle. Outliers was a book written by Malcolm Gladwell, and he spoke about how children who were born early in a year, and he is, of course, is Northern Hemisphere, so children born in August, September, at the beginning of the school year, had more advantages and did better in sport. And of course that does happen. And so one of the problems that happens is that your little one is kind of a little bit more advanced, because remember, you've got an 11-month gap from the kid who's born in January to December. And so when they come in at grade 1, the little ones who are born in January are better swimmers, and they might be better runners, and they might be better drawers, because they're almost a year older. And so what ends up happening, and this is where I feel that education is so terribly flawed, is that extra attention is given to those children who are advanced and that are moving ahead. And so everything gets channeled into them. And what ends up happening is that that gap widens, and it makes me absolutely furious. It's probably one of the things that makes me most angry. What then happens is later on, the catch-up happens. And we sometimes see it in kind of grade 6 and grade 7, sometimes early high school. This catch-up suddenly happens. Boys do it later than girls. And at that point, it makes no difference if you're born in the December or the January. But a lot of the schools like to get the kids that are early on in the year. And so they really try and persuade you not to bring your child or to put your child over into the next year. I really think that we need to have a look at what their social needs are, and school readiness will come. These little kiddies will catch up. You have to trust me on that. As long as you are giving them the attention that they need, maybe a little bit of extra attention to help them span that gap while they're in a primary school, if it's an outcomes-based education system. But really, they need to be in their social set. They need to be in a group of kids where they feel comfortable socially. So that's why when I talk about the how, prioritize the social. Make sure your little one is playing with is in the year of the children that they like to play with. And very often, particularly in most of our South African schools, that means that they need to go into the year that they're playing sport, because otherwise they play sport in the year above them, they're academically in the year below, and they're not making friends in the same year. So as much as possible, please try and move your child into the year that they're going to play sport, if they're in that type of school that makes them play sport in their year. So that's one of the questions you're going to need to ask. The other thing is that I really think that assessments shouldn't be done with little children at all. I really don't. And the reason is, I said to you already, that there's a massive range of normal. So in Play Sense, we do not assess skills at all in little ones. And that's important because it means that we know that the things that are going to make the difference for them is their personality. It's not how well they can skip or run or how many words they can say at 2 years old. It's who they are inside. And so an understanding of the child's learning style is much more important than understanding their performance level. So please do not allow your child to be assessed early on. That's very important. And then one of the things that really irks me is the use of performance-enhancing drugs. So as an occupational therapist, I am definitely not against drugs like Ritalin, but I do think that they're used in primary school to try and catch these little ones up who just are developmentally going to catch up in their own time. So be very wary of schools that try and pigeonhole your child and put them into one mold, saying that all children need to achieve these developmental milestones in this period. And if they're not, they're off the curve. They're going to need their performance-enhancing drugs like Ritalin or whatever it is. So it's very important to me that when you are choosing schools, choose it according to your child more than anything, and don't go for schools that are pushing you into a pigeonhole for performance reasons. All right, so that brings us back to the little ones. So there I was talking a little bit about the school-going age, just jumping around with all the questions. This question was, how much structure and curriculum should a little one have? So when they're in playgroup. And this one, again, we feel very passionate about. Play is truly a child's work. And so if you walk into your child's play school and there are tables and chairs and your child is 2 or 3 years old, they've lost the plot. 2-year-olds should not be doing tabletop activities. They should not be doing puzzles that can only be finished in one particular way. the outcome of their art should be a mess because it's all about the process. It's not about the outcome at this age. So play is important. Play is process-based. It's not output-based. It's not, nobody starts to play and thinks, well, that's how this game is going to end. Little children start to play and they engage freely. And that's the way that it should be at that age. The minute you're getting into an outcomes-based education system, I believe that that is flawed. And I believe that it's flawed not just for the little one, but particularly for the little ones. So how do we do this? So for older children, please limit homework. And for our little ones, don't overschedule extramurals. If your little one is in a play sense group 3 mornings a week, or in a play group 3 mornings a week, you don't have to fill every afternoon with a play date. Overscheduling extramurals means that there's less time for free play, and free play is critically important for the development of those soft skills that we spoke about. Watch out for those tabletop activities. Refuse for your child to do them. It's not the age and stage for them. All of our art activities with our little ones are done on the floor or on an elevated surface like a wall or an easel, or on a little tray on their laps. And that's because of the way in which our fine motor and gross motor foundations or stability develops at that age. And please don't push children into learning to read too early. And this is a flaw in many education systems in the world. And I'm sure you may or may not be familiar with the research that was done comparing children who learn to read at 4 years old in the UK system versus children who learn to read at 7 years old in the Danish system, which the South African system is the same as that. And within a year or two, they were absolutely on the same trajectory. So, and with a whole lot less stress. So don't push your children to learn to read too little either. So that's just a little bit on how structured activities should be. All right, now we're getting on to some play sense questions. This was a question from a mum who said, I'm thinking about hosting a play sense group. What are the benefits? So I was a play sense host 3 times over. So, and this really is my take of being involved in play sense and also being a play sense mum. We know that learning and connections, neural connections between 2 brain cells happens best when there's lots of happy endorphins rushing around. And that when we're stressed and we retreat out of our cortical brain into our limbic brain, or even worse, into our vagal and anxiety-laden brain, our brainstem, we know that we do no learning because we come out of our cortex. So children have to learn in a happy environment. And my belief around the home is that a home, and it doesn't have to be your home, it can be somebody else's home, is the happiest and safest space. I also believe that home is convenient. The amount of time, and I'm sure this has shown you all how much extra, well, you didn't get a lot of extra work done when your children were at home during lockdown, but certainly if you didn't have children at home, you would have got a lot more work done without dealing with traffic. And I believe that the convenience of being in a home that's close to you or in your own home is unparalleled. And I very selfishly became a host mum because I didn't want to have to leave work at 12 o'clock exactly. So I knew my little one was at home, and the nanny could just, when all the other little kiddies had left or the teacher had gone home, she was at home anyway. Homes are also an underutilized asset. And when we use an underutilized asset, we don't have to build an expensive infrastructure. So our school fees can be contained and our teachers can earn more. And so they become better teachers because they really are incentivized. One of the things that I want to tell you about is that if you are one of those parents that wants your home to be the home where the teenagers play, which was a big priority for us. We wanted our children to be in our home all the way through adolescence. We wanted the teenagers to come into our home because we believe that if we could have our teens at home, we could control for a whole lot of variables that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to control for if they were walking around the mall or going to clubs. And so we wanted our teenagers to party in our home, and our homes throughout have become the home the teenagers have come to. And that started when I made the decision to become a host home. Because when you're a host home, you change your mentality and you are the home that welcomes the children in, you welcome families in, and it's a critical shift in mindset. So how do we do it with PlaySense? How do you do how do you become a PlaySense home? Well, first of all, you don't have to worry about being a teacher. I would have been a useless teacher, and I'm sure many of you feel like you don't want to be the teacher either. So we give you your teachers, we train them. Your teachers comes with all her equipment, so you don't have to provide absolutely anything. All that happens if you want to be a host is that we come and we do a host home check. We have a look at what your home looks like. We make sure there's no open water, there's no dogs running around, and there's no access to the road. And those are the 3 main things. And then we have a couple of other criteria. We also make sure that all the legal is done for you, so you don't have to worry about any legal consequences. We sign the indemnities with you, and our teachers are also covered by insurance. And of course, another benefit of being a host home is that you do get a discounted rate. So if this sounds to you like you are the type of person who really wants to have your children in your home, and you had a family because you want to have a full space, this is really, really, I think, the very best you can do. All right, I actually interviewed Lara this morning, so let's see what she had to say about it, as she was also a host mum. Hey, Lara, good to see you.
Lovely to see you.
Lara, we share a lot in common, but one of the things we share in common is that we have both been PlaySense host parents. And a lot of questions come through from mums that I know you and I have the instant answers to, and I just thought it would be really great for people to hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were. So you were a host mom for Timmy's group, and why did you become a host parent in the first place?
Oh, Meg, I think just the idea of having him stay in the house and have his little friends come over was just such an idea of nurturing and of just being the home, the hub of creating a little community, because I thought that, you know, that his house will become Timmy's house, and that all the little ones will want to keep coming to Timmy's house. And then I think also just selfishly the convenience of not having to drop and fetch him, having two older boys to already running off to school every day. So yeah, that was very much the same as mine, I must say. Selfishly, the convenience is crazy to not have to be the person to leave work at 11:30 to get your little one at 12 was a big driver for me as well. Before you signed up, or when you think about parents who are thinking about signing up, what are the benefits that would immediately spring to mind prior to actually signing up? So I think the benefits for your little one is that it is that they still feel very comfortable, safe, and we know that when a child feels safe, that their brain lights up for learning. I think if you have a social little one, or even a shy little one, on two levels, it really brings them out. So the shy little one having to be the host and all their little friends coming, I think they step into that. And then for my little Tim, he's such a social butterfly that it was just the best that all his friends were coming and jumping on his trampoline, and then would come for other play dates and birthday parties. I mean, it all becomes a real community. I think having him at home is also really important from the immune system. So whether you're the host parent or other, one of the other parents, having this home-based idea is so great for their immune systems, because all my friends who went to the traditional preschool route, their children were sick every 2 to 3 weeks. So I think that's wonderful. And I think they're going to be in school for the rest of their lives. So to kind of keep them out of an institution for as long as possible is really a big benefit to me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I mean, while you were talking, a couple of things came to mind. One was one of our other teachers, just an amazing teacher. Her little boy in the host home she was the teacher in, was a really slow to warm up little one, highly anxious, just didn't engage easy with people, would hide in his bedroom when people first arrived. I can remember for our first host home visit, and very quickly kind of engaged in the group and started to socialize, which he hadn't been socializing before. And it highlighted for me that child would have just absolutely floundered in a school, been very anxious and unhappy in a school, where actually, because it was in his own home, he got to warm up a little quicker than he would have if he was in a school. And the other thing that I thought about, because you were talking about immunity, and I thought about allergies as well. I know Timmy was a little bit of an allergic baby, but we've had some really serious allergic kiddies in our PlaySense program. And that was another thing for mums, that this meant that they could control, because when you're a mum of a really seriously allergic child, you want to be able to control the environment for as long as possible. And this kind of allows you to do it if it's in your home. So yeah, a couple of benefits. Yeah. And then, I mean, a lot of parents have the concern about, my house isn't big enough, I haven't got the space, I'm working from home. I know that those boxes are ticked for you. Your house is not massive, it's a gorgeous home, but it is not enormous, didn't have a bespoke space. You were working from home a lot. Your husband actually has his off day on a Monday and is at home. You don't have a live-in maid who was coming in early in the morning. So all these terrible things that parents think about. How did you make it work?
Well, I just have to say it's worth every bit of effort that you have to put in. But I think initially we really just need a space, 4 by 4 meters. I think ours is actually 4 by 3 meters, but and an outdoor little play area. So initially there was making sure that the dogs are separate and putting up a little fence for that. And then we decided actually that they would just play on the front garden, not the back garden. And then we swapped because my grass did take a little bit of wear and tear. But I think you work it out, and that speaks to relationship with your teacher, and that our teachers all want to make it work, obviously, and so they'll do anything to make it work. And then I planted a little fairy garden for them. It's really up to you. We ended up getting bunnies and chickens, but you really just need that space where the teacher can actually close the door, keep them inside, and access a toilet. That was also really important. And for us to work from home, I guess it's like any boundary. You have to whether the play group was there or not, someone would have had to learn that if mommy is working, then he has to be with his nanny. Mm-hmm. And so it's just putting in that boundary. I don't mind the noise of children playing, so that was fine. I think it's so worth it. It's so worth the extra effort. And then the tidying up, I guess that was always just the little bit of the hard part. But I think, again, talking to a teacher and having the routine set out that, she stayed extra one day of the week and did a deep clean. The rest of the time it was just quick tidy up and off she ran. But we made it work, absolutely, and it was worth every little bit of effort.
Yeah, and I mean, really, it is the teacher's responsibility to clean the space when she arrives in the morning, to set it up, to take it down by the end of the afternoon, return the space to what it looked like before she arrived. We had one teacher who actually taught in a dining room, kind of pushed the dining room table back, set up the room, put everything away in a cupboard that they'd given her afterwards, and it was back to a dining room by 12:30. So by the time everyone got home in the afternoon from collecting the other kids, the school was returned to being a room of the home. So, yeah, I mean, I think it is, like you say, it is, the benefits far outweigh the hassle factor. I personally didn't find a hassle factor because with all three of my kids, we had a playroom that they could use. With my firstborn, admittedly, it was actually the TV room, but we didn't have any other kids, so it didn't matter. With the other two, we actually had a separate playroom. But for me, it just was just such an amazing journey, and I know it has been like that for you as well.
And Meg, I think for me, the idea that parents often say, but don't I have to supply toys or equipment? Or I think that is so important to highlight, is the teacher actually arrives with a boot full of things every day. So your little ones are getting different things every day, and then she leaves out as much as she can already set up. So you are not supplying anything. I think the only thing we bought was a little plastic table and chairs, and that was it. So to have a home, school in my home, and not have to even think of the equipment is really a plus.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, La. I think, I can reiterate everything that you've said. My experience of hosting was much like yours, and a fabulous experience. So thank you, and thanks for everything that you do for PlaySense. We'll chat soon.
Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Right, okay, so let's go on to, this is our last question, and then just the 3 tips that came from my personal experience. So I don't know how many of you this has happened to. You can and maybe just put your hand up if it's happened to you. It's a horrible thing, but this is the question. We put our child's name down at birth at a private school near us for grade 0. Now they've called us to say that there's a space in the grade 000 class, and that if we don't take it, we're going to lose our space. Should we take it? So I don't know how many of you that has happened to, but it's certainly up. There we go, all the hands going up. So it certainly happened to me, and it was really, really irked me. My 3rd child was at a farm school after PlaySense, so she went through PlaySense, 2 to 3 year old, 3 to 5 years old. I put her into a farm school down the road, and she was with pigs and animals, and that was how we wanted it. And we got called by the school, and I stood my ground. And I think it's very important that we don't get held hostage. I think what often happens is that we are held hostage. They kidnap our brains, and they say, well, if they don't come now at this very young age, then they won't get in at all. I want you to know a few things. This is as an experienced mom, not as an occupational therapist. I promise you there will be a space. And the fact that you're being held hostage by these schools is wrong. There's a lot of really, really good schools that have come up, from really sound Model C schools through to fabulous green schools, through to all sorts of levels of schools. And I just think that there will be a space for your child. And primary school, while it's important, I don't think you should be held hostage for your little ones. Rather choose the right school for your child for that particular year. The next year will take care of itself. And always make sure you choose the right school for your child, rather than trying to squeeze them into a box. And I think when you see, I know that for the decisions that I made, some of them were made incorrectly on that basis. Right, okay, so we're now going to go on to, my personal perspective. So I'm going to tell you, first of all, what I would have done over as a mum of 3, and then I'm going to tell you about the best decisions I made. So one of the first decisions was being held hostage for primary school for my firstborn. I didn't do it with my next 2 because I had learned by then. But my firstborn got taken into a primary school at 3 years old. So he only did 1 year of play sense and then into a primary school that had a 000. And he cried pretty much every single year, every single day of those 3 years. And then actually lacked confidence in his grade 1, 2, and 3 years. And I do think that pushing our children into institutions that are too big, too early is not the right way to go. And for me, I know that if I had the clock back right now, there's no chance that James would have gone to that school at that age. The second mistake I made was choosing a monastic primary school. I think co-ed is fabulous. I think little ones need to mix. I think later on, monastic can work really, really well for some children. My 3 children did go to monastic schools, single-sex schools for high school, but I'm not sure it's the best decision for the primary school years, particularly for little boys who often actually need to have that energy of little girls around as well. And then I think that all of my children should have more, I wish that all my children in the early days had more experiential learning and less homework. And there has been a trend towards less homework. Thankfully, by the time my 3rd child came through school, there was way less homework. And really, it's very important that the whole way through primary school, your child is not overscheduled, not doing too much extra cricket practice, not doing too much homework, but just having time for free play. So those are 3 things that I think I would have done over. So where did I win? So I definitely won with play sense. I can tell you that they are the happiest memories. This particular one is my youngest child, and this is in our home. We had a very big garden, as you can see on the bottom right picture. But those 4 little ones really, really explored their world. Our downstairs playroom was turned into what looked like a school. You can see the posters on the wall, and we were lucky that we were able to leave it like that permanently. And there were our little monkeys, see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. And we really did have fun. And it was on my daughter's, not this child, one of my other ones, 18th birthday that she wrote me a letter about thanking me for being her mom. And amazingly, one of the things she put in there was that the very best thing that ever happened for her was having play sense in her home. And she was thinking back to the days when she was 2 years old. And I do think that being a host mum actually set me up to be the type of parent I've been able to be to my teenagers. There's always the mess. There's always the noise. We're the ones who people complain about our house in the neighborhood because the children are making a noise. But that's okay, because my children are home, my children are with me, and my children are safe. And that for me was incredibly important. So I would say that as a parent who prioritized that, in that way, I did win. And then just the last thing that I think that I won at, and this I've alluded to it, this ability to self-regulate our brain and later on our attention span becomes critically important. And it starts in the early days. It starts in a program like PlaySense, where we focus specifically on the development of self-regulation. But holding off on things like medication later on becomes something that I think is very important. So one of my kids did have ADD, still does have, and that's okay. But we held off for the whole of primary school and made sure that we used sport to help regulate their brain neurotransmitters rather than medication. Later on, medication could come when it was needed. But I think when I look back, those were decisions I made right. I know that as a parent of a very little baby, a lot of these things probably weigh on you, maybe things that you hadn't actually thought you'd be confronted with. And maybe one day you'll look back at this talk and just think about the fact that actually there was maybe a little bit of wisdom that you could take from it. So I really hope that I've helped you, that I've guided you. And I hope that you join the PlaySense family. I do think that it is the best you can do for your little one, and that we'll be alongside you for the journey for the next step as well, and help to guide you. Our program goes through until 5 years old. So I'm now going to switch across. I'm going to stop talking. I think you've heard enough from me on what I had planned. I'm going to now go across to our Q&As. So let me just stop sharing here. Okay, so our Q&As and our chats. So, all right, Kate. Hi, Meg. The interview with Lara was very useful because I also work from home and have questions about space and noise, etc. While hosting a PlaySense group. So I was at home for 2 of my children's PlaySense groups. One, I was actually an occupational therapist practicing in a little cottage on the property as well. And it was absolutely fine. Our kids are so engaged with the teacher that they toddle off in the morning, they disappear, and they definitely, it isn't a hassle. One of the girls who works for us, Jen, I don't know if she's watching this evening, I think she's actually presenting something to our teachers tonight and doing some training. But she sent us a photograph on our WhatsApp group the other day of her little boy, because she has her host home, she's the host home for her little boy, standing at the front door with his little backpack on his back, ready to go to school, waiting for teacher Di to arrive. And I just really thought that was just amazing, because actually what it ended up happening was that he thought he was going to school, even though it was happening in his own home. So I do think that even if you are a work from home parent, it is a fabulous thing to do. To be honest with you, what I used to do was I used to disappear into my study, go and do my work. In those days, I owned Baby Sense, and so I was doing all that baby product production. And so my nanny used to go downstairs, collect my little one from her school, and she used to take her and put her in a cot for her to do at the middle of the day. And so it really wasn't an issue for me at all. Moving across to the Q&As, we've just got 2 of them here. All right, so we are isolating at home because of health concerns surrounding COVID. My 4-year-old misses his play school. We have virtual play dates, but they aren't reliable. I'm interested in online PlaySense classes, but every day seems like a bit much for me. And my kid, Zoom fatigue is real. It absolutely is real. Is there a 2 or 3 day option? Absolutely. Our online groups run 5 days a week, our online Zooms. They are absolutely amazing. Our teachers have been very carefully trained in how to really engage with your little one, and you can choose to go whichever days you want to go. That is no problem at all. And you can also choose different times of day as well. And then the last question is, do the schools have a diverse group of children? Yes, that is something that we absolutely pride ourselves on. We really are a very diverse South African group of children in our groups. Some of our Joburg groups have more children of colour. Some of our Cape Town northern suburbs do as well. So it really is important to us, and it's a principle that we believe is critically important being in South Africa. The children really do grow up knowing that their best little friends are the friends that they've made in this play group, and that they come from all sorts of different backgrounds. So absolutely, diversity is important to us, and we also are prioritizing diversity in teachers. So if any of you are interested, please do pop us an email as well. Amanda, great question. Is it detrimental to allow toddlers to watch TV? We had a talk last week on technology. TV is not great for toddlers, quite simply because other than being a screen, it's a screen with no social interaction. So for toddlers, the best type of screen time should be social screen time. So things like Zoom and play groups, try and limit TV and try and curb the time. So definitely, kind of 10 minutes in the late afternoon or 10 minutes in the morning is fine, but a whole day of TV is detrimental, particularly for language and social skills. All right, another question. Hi, Meg. Could you elaborate on the age frame for PlaySense? Is it 2 to 4 or 2 to 5? Okay, great question. So it is currently 2 to 4 years old. So your child can join just before they turn 2. So from about 18 months old or 20 months old, little ones put their names down. They then go all the way through that year and then leave at the end of the year that they turn 4. So it usually gives them about 2 to 2.5 years in PlaySense. However, Lara is currently, she's our Director of Education, she's currently working on our 4 to 5 curriculum. It has to have pre-maths and pre-literacy skills, so we have to start bedding that down. But we have found an incredible program which is totally play-based, also play-based, but focusing in on maths and on language. And we're going to bring in the maths components through into the second year of PlaySense, and the maths and language for reading and writing coming into the third year of PlaySense. So that is not ready yet, but it will be ready early next year. All right. Hi, Meg. My 4-year-old is at a school which she really enjoys. I think she's struggling with self-regulation, and although I'm calm and try and talk her through her feelings, why she can't have X when she wants it, her response is often very dramatic, and I'm not always sure how to deal with it. Do you have any advice on how to approach her outcries? Yeah. So first of all, and that comes into our talk, which is on toddlers' boundaries, positive boundaries and discipline. And so I think acknowledging her feelings are very important. I also think having boundaries are important. So if it's something that she's pushing the boundary on that is a no-go, then you have to dig your heels in and you have to be very firm. So that would be something like saying, I know that you want cookies right before supper. Let's say that was your thing. The boundary is you're not going to have it. And then allowing her to have her meltdown if she does, offering her a choice, and then if she has the meltdown, allowing her to have it. However, that said, I do think that sometimes with us as parents is we choose to chase down too many things. And so we end up with parenting fatigue because we cannot fight every battle. And so they end up learning that if they throw a big enough frothy and a big enough tantrum, we'll eventually give in because we're too tired to put in place. So please pick your boundaries carefully. Don't try and instill every single boundary, but once you've chosen it, be very consistent. Okay. All right, Kate, is it possible to train my current au pair to be a play sense teacher so she can stay with us? Absolutely. We have got teachers in our group who do that. So you've got two choices, Kate. The first is that your au pair can become a play sense teacher. She'll have to go through our normal vetting process, but it's not too onerous. And it is possible, just so that you know, that at the moment we're offering a scholarship for some of our teachers. So if you want to host in your home and she wants to be trained, she could potentially be one of the recipients of that scholarship, which means that her training would be free. So she would need to apply. The second option for her is that she actually joins an online group. So you register your child in an online play sense group, which costs half the price of a regular play sense group, and she becomes a teacher at home. So we actually deliver you the curriculum, so she can do that curriculum every day, plus your child will get the socialization on the Zooms as well. So you've actually got two options, Kate, and both of them are absolutely brilliant options. All right, Sanette. Our little one's Afrikaans. Is the fact that play sense teachers are English going to impact his speech? Okay, so play sense teachers are not all English. We have translated our entire curriculum, the whole thing, into Afrikaans. So we have got Afrikaans groups. There's one in Somerset West, there's one in Durbanville, there's one in Pretoria. We've got little Afrikaans groups all over the place, so we can find you one. And if we don't have one in your area, we can train up a teacher for an area if you're going to host in your home. There's one also in Vredehuk in the Western Cape as well. So we've got in Cape Town. So we've got them all over. So we've got the Afrikaans groups. Having said that, the next part of your question is being in a Afrikaans group going to impact his speech? And the answer to that question is that it depends. For some little ones who've got robust language foundations, so in other words, they've got the aptitude for it's good for language, learning 2 languages is no problem. So that comes in our dual lingo homes. So you can have a dad who's Zulu and a mom who's Afrikaans, and there's absolutely no problem. Your little one can learn both languages. But if your little one doesn't have the capacity for language, in other words, they're slightly delayed and they're always on the back foot, then it is preferable that they are taught and that they are spoken to in one language until such time as that language explodes, and then you can introduce a second language. Monique, will the 4 to 5-year-old group be online too? Yes, it will. Absolutely. So what we've actually done is that our entire curriculum is all of our teachers, whether they're online teachers or in-home teachers, have got access to both, have got access to the same curriculum, and it's the same curriculum conducted in both. And the reason for that is if we have a sudden lockdown again, like the UK might be looking at tomorrow, if we have a sudden lockdown again, we can just shift your child in the same curriculum into an online program as well, and they can maintain their friendships and their learning. All right, Sally, Meg, you may have covered this, but I unfortunately missed the beginning. My little boy is 6 months old. What do you feel is the best situation? Staying at home with nanny and an au pair, or sending him to creche? So Sally, I did deal with it, but I would be honored to tell you it again. A primary relationship that's 1-on-1 or maximum 2-on-1 with a little baby of this age is way, way more beneficial than having them in a creche where they're one of quite a few babies. At this age, that relationship aspect is what is critically important. So I would have my child at home with a nanny before I would send them to a creche, aside from all the germ issues. But really on a social and future skills level, I definitely would have them at home. Having said that, it's very important that your nanny or your au pair is trained. They need to have first aid training, and they need to know that the priority is your child, not the housework, because the worst thing that ends up happening is that if your nanny or your au pair have too many other responsibilities, they get frustrated with caring for your little one, and then that kind of defeats the whole object. All right, another question. Will the new and extended PlaySense program be incorporated into the current program, or will we need to find a new PlaySense home for our 4-year-old? Nope, it's going to be incorporated. So all of our teachers will be trained on it closer to the end of the year. And once that happens, they'll be able to roll it out. And so little ones can either just stay with them, or they can move into another PlaySense group if that's what you want to do. Are there any prerequisites to becoming a teacher? Oh, yes, you can't just become a teacher. So we have quite a rigorous system that our teachers go through, recruitment system. So they have to have experience with little ones. Occasionally we'll take somebody who's actually changing career. One of our best teachers was somebody who came out of corporate, but she had already spent quite a bit of time learning about little ones, working as an au pair when she was younger, and she was already enrolled in an ECD part-time program to study. So you actually have to have had experience. You have to have had some sort of undergraduate training that looks at some sort of early childhood or psychology. So we've got lots of OTs, play therapists, and au pairs who've had years of experience are also welcome as well. So there's lots of prerequisites. We do our criminal checks, obviously, and they also have to be first aid trained. All right, 2 more questions and then we're done. It's been a longer one this evening. Do we find the children in your area to join the classes once you become a teacher? So you do it both ways. We find them for you. We've got the most amazing platform. You can go onto playsense.org and have a look, and you'll actually see all of our teachers come up. So if a parent's hunting for somebody in their area, if they're in Northcliffe, they go and pop on, they put in Northcliffe, and the teachers closest to them come up. So we do it both ways. And then the last question for the evening, is it possible to attend an existing play group if PlaySense would be a good fit for us? So are you saying, would you be able to try it? You can pop in and have a look. A lot of our parents do just go and have a look at what it's like when they're enrolling their little one, and we are very happy to accommodate that. Okay, sorry, last question, because it's a good one. Meg, you said you wouldn't get a little one assessed, and we were advised to see an OT for possible low muscle tone. It turns out that he simply has clumsy child syndrome. However, she did a full assessment and advised me to work on certain areas like block building to get him in the green. Do you think I should ignore this advice and just allow him to play and explore and learn as his interests drives him? Wow, that is such a good question. Okay, so there is a place for occupational therapy assessments and for professional assessments when there are a cluster of delays. So we would be looking at a little one who is very clumsy, late to speak maybe, not able to self-feed. So if your little one's got a whole cluster of things, then having an OT assessment is not a bad idea. And then they can give you activities to do, but incorporate those activities into the playtime. That's what's very important. The first line of defense should always be that play comes first, and then build the activities in. When I was talking about assessments, I wasn't so much talking about assessments when we think something's wrong, because there is a place for that. I'm talking about the fact that often your children will go into school and they will be assessed on the basis of a standardized assessment that kind of looks at outcomes basis, and that for me, for little children, is flawed. I think the children need to be able to develop independent of what the norm and the bell curve says. So that's what it's about. So with that, I wish you luck. It is a massive journey and a massive responsibility to educate our little ones. But I think that if you trust the way that nature intended it, which is things like free play, a little bit of downtime, a lot of slow education, these slow schools are coming up. We don't have to put our children into the rat race. We don't have to get them onto that treadmill too early, and we definitely don't need to institutionalize them before they have to be. And that is one of the reasons why I believe that home-based education really is the best thing we can do for our little ones. So thank you for joining me tonight. You will get a copy of the information out of this talk. You can revisit it and share it, and do join us as PlaySense parents. We'd love to have you on board. Good evening. Thank you.